Good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me? All righty, thank you so much. So, welcome to Diversity in Libraries here at the University of South Carolina. I'm Dr. Nicole Cook, and welcome to another edition of the Baker Lecture Series. And so I'm super excited to welcome today's guest. We have Heather McCue with us, and Heather works in the children's room at Richland Library here in Columbia. And Heather is actually one of the first people I met once I got the job. And, definitely it was a good omen for the job that I was about to take to meet such a dynamic librarian and also see some of the amazing things that she and her colleagues are doing at Richland. So Heather is a graduate of our program here at the School of Library and Information Science at the University of South Carolina. She was named a 2015 Mover and Shaker by Library Journal magazine and named as a change agent. And she was also the 2016 Outstanding Librarian named by the South Carolina Library Association. So we are in for a treat today as we learn from Heather's expertise and a really great example of someone who is doing diversity work on the ground. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Heather. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cook. I really appreciate it. Can everyone hear me? Excellent. So thank you. This is such a huge honor. I was telling Dr. Cook that I just feel completely a little overwhelmed to be here talking to you. First of all, I'm a big fan of Dr. Cook and knew that I would be within a few minutes of meeting her. And then to be part of the Augusta Baker series of lectures is just really tremendous for me. And I'm going to talk about Augusta Baker shortly, but I'm going to just kind of bear with me. Now comes the time when I have technical difficulties. Okay, there we go. Just kind of what we're going to cover today. This is going to be, I'm going to try to make this a very boots on the ground, a very personal conversation, and please feel free to chime in chat if you have questions or you want me to elaborate on a point, and I'm going to try to talk and keep up with chat as we go. If I miss something, please feel free. There will be an opportunity to circle around about that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about beginning my journey because I do feel like all things in libraries it's a personal journey, and everyone is starting somewhere different with diversity. So I want to talk a little bit about my journey. I want to talk about how I think about diversity in services, so we're all on the same page for that. I'm going to talk about some of the diverse services for children and families at Richland Library, and then about continuing the journey because I know I was lucky enough to be in the program at the University of South Carolina. So I know that we're all, not all in South Carolina, and that we may be going in different directions once you graduate. So I want to kind of touch on what you can think about going forward as a librarian, especially in public services. As I said, I'm a huge fan of Augusta Baker. I never had the privilege of meeting her, but every April, as part of the Augusta Baker's Dozen Storytelling Festival, I stand on the steps of the Robert Mills House and I say these words: "We thank our maker for Augusta Baker," written by Maurice Sendak. And I think so much about the work that Augusta did and the life and the legacy that she has left behind. And for those of you that don't know a lot about her, one of the things that I've been lucky enough to know, I didn't get to meet her, but I knew I have colleagues that were taught storytelling by Augusta Baker, and she liked the truth, and she trusted stories and books and believed very much in the power of those books and stories to make changes in people's lives. So that is very much the philosophy that we have here at Richland Library, whether we're talking about storytelling or story time, is that we don't do costumes, we don't do a lot of affectation, because it's not about the person telling or reading, it's about the story itself. So it seems very apropos to talk about Augusta Baker's philosophy as we embark on diversity. As I said, I feel like it's a very personal journey. So this is me, and it is National Love Your Pet Day. So here you go. Here's the pupper and the cat tax. That's Violet is the dog, and Nobody Owens is the cat. And yes, named after the graveyard book, like a true librarian. And just a few things about me in addition to the kind words that Nicole said. I serve on our African American History and Cultural Events Committee here at the library. I was part of the Social Awareness Task Force, and now I've moved over to the Let's Talk Race Strategic Plan team. I serve on the board of Richland County First Steps, but we're now actually Richland First Steps, and I also serve on the board of Reader-Rama. So that's just a little extra tidbits about me. And I mentioned some of those specifically because they've been very instrumental in helping me think and widen my aperture as I think about diversity and the way that we serve our community. Now, does anybody know who this is? And it's okay if you don't. I certainly didn't, and I'll talk a little bit if anybody wants to guess. When I was in undergraduate, I was a communications theater major, and thank you, Dr. Cook, there you go. It's Paul Robeson, and in my major, I had to take a theater history class, and the professor passed around a bowl of topics, so you pick things at random. And I remember sitting in class, and I remember the bowl coming to me and picking out my topic, and I remember looking at the topic and thinking, this isn't for me. And but I held off and waited till the end of class and went up and talked to my professor and said, I'm happy to do whatever topic. I understand they're at random, but I don't think that this topic is necessarily for me. And he asked me what the topic was, and I said, it's the history of African American theater, late 1800s, early turn of the century. And he stopped and looked at me and said, it's for you. And indeed, that history is for me, and it's for everyone. And that was a real seminal moment for me to think about things, how we think about things are for us or not for us, and how we have agency and advocacy to help change the conversation and to change services at our locations. So one of the things I actually do, I just led a Black History Month program, African American Stories, with my colleague Jocelyn Pettigrew. And our tip is Black history is our history. It is for everyone. So I think changing that dialogue and helping everyone understand that history is our history. It is a shared history. Because privilege comes with responsibility. When you realize that you are the privileged person in the conversation, you have power and you have responsibility. To talk about our Let's Talk Race series, I started going to that as an participant. This is before I was part of the Social Awareness Task Force. And I remember getting very frustrated and very angry because probably 2 or 3 talks in, I was still seeing that the attendees were predominantly African American, and I thought to myself, how in the world are we going to change the conversation about race and racism in our community, if half of our community is not showing up, and it's the half that have the most power and privilege to do something about what's going on. So I think when you have privilege, that you need to use that to amplify voices, to talk about who's being left out of the conversation. And I think that goes a long way when we talk about diversity. The other thing I'd like to say, and again, I want to speak from my own personal experience and not for anyone else, that it can be daunting. I think that I often freeze because I'm scared I'll make a mistake. Maybe I'll use the wrong terminology, or I won't call someone by the right pronoun. And sometimes that puts me in that frozen state. And I think understanding that mistakes are going to be made and our job is to learn from them and do better is huge. And I also think, and again, obviously, white, cisgender woman, I understand, or I've started to come to understand that when I feel discomfort in a particular situation, that is probably indicative of me either needing to learn more or sit in that discomfort. I remember having a moment where a situation felt very uncomfortable. I remember it vividly. It was the summer when Philando Castile was murdered by the police, and I remember thinking to myself, I wish I could take a day away from this, but I also realized that my friends never get to take a day away from it. So I think we're, as white people, we're not used to sitting in the discomfort the way that our other members of our community are. And so I think we've got to learn that that's part of our journey as well. So when we talk about diversity in services, the way that I like to look at it, because again, I know that everybody's operating from a different starting point, and all libraries are different. And so I like to see diversity as a through line. It's not just a display, it's not just a service, it's not just a program, but it's something that should be part of just about, I can't think of a decision where diversity would not play into part of your decision making. So that's what I want to kind of talk to you about in this segment of the lecture. So we talk a lot about here at Richland Library about human-centered or user-centered design. And so facilities can play a huge part about whether your community feels welcome, whether it's easy for them to get into the building. So the picture at the top is our fairly new, it's about 1.5 years old now, lower entry point from the lower lot, our lower parking lot. Before, children and families had to walk. If they parked in that lower lot, they had to walk a long way to get to one of our doors, and we always knew that that was not a very welcoming experience for them. And so when we were able to remodel, we were able to rectify that. So thinking about how accessible your facilities are, also thinking about what do people see right when they walk in the door. We have security staff. We want them to be welcoming. We don't want our customers to feel like they're being scrutinized, that they're unwelcome, that they're being profiled. So those are experience principles that really go into before they even meet you. They're forming opinions about the kind of library this is. And it can even be things like, so down below is the felt wall that is in our children's area. And I love it. It's very colorful, and people come in and comment it and want to take photos in front of it. But I do remember when we were in the remodeling phase, I thought, wow, that's a lot of color and that's a lot going on. And how will children on the spectrum react to that? So we haven't had any issues thus far, but I think it's something that we have to think, and those are some services that we're pondering expanding, is our services to children and families who are on the spectrum. So thinking about that, another example is our Storytime room. Our Storytime room is beautiful. It's new. It has a very industrial look, especially at the top, which made for a lot of echo in the room. And so it created a lot of sound issues. And I just recently, again, I'm still on my journey of diversity, saw a post from someone, and the post said, when a presenter says, no thank you to a microphone, they're saying they're okay, but they're not thinking about me. It's like having a meeting on the third floor and being offered the ramp and saying, no, I'm good, and ignoring your colleague who might be in a wheelchair. So I am definitely one of those people that tends to go without a microphone because of my theater background. I think I've got a big booming voice. But from now on, I will always be sure to take the microphone during lectures, during presentations, so that I can be sure that everyone is included in that experience and they don't have to ask me. So same thing with to circle back to our Storytime room, it was a very echoey space. We have put in some sound dampening panels, which have helped a lot, but now we do use microphones because we do have children who have some hearing loss and some deafness, so we want to make sure that they can be part of that experience as well. Staff. So you really want to think about the staff that you have at the desk. Does it reflect your community? And you have to be very intentional. I know some of you've already seen the presentation by my colleagues, Tamara King, Dee Robinson, and Cece Holloway. So you know that we're putting forth some very intentional efforts to bring diversity across our staff. So I'm going to go through this very briefly because you have heard some of this already or seen some of this already. We have a race and social equity strategic plan team that is being led by Dee Robinson. And one of the things that struck me, I love that they kind of took a small microcosm to really think about how good are we. We say that we're really open to diversifying our staff and really bringing new people on board, but how good a job are we doing? So they looked at our leadership program, and so and it's been going on for a long time. I was a leadership graduate way back in, I think, 2007. So in 2017, this is what it looked like in terms of our leadership class. The dark blue is our colleagues that are of the majority, and the light blue triangle is our colleagues that are minorities. And so they saw that in 2017, this is where we were, and they wanted to know what the barriers were. And I think these are some really interesting conversation pieces. They went and talked to some of the people that our staff that either didn't apply or weren't accepted for leadership. They realized that the application was dependent solely on writing, and it's just like standardized testing. Some people are good at that, and some people, that's not their strong point, but they bring a lot of other skill sets to the game. You're not looking at the whole person. So this is kind of that same question that I ask, is this for me? Is this program really for me? I'm not an MLIS. I'm not a librarian. How will this help me? Maybe I'm not here long enough. Maybe I've been here too long. So my supervisor didn't encourage me. Maybe this is something I shouldn't do. I've tried several times. So all these reasons were reasons that people were the barriers to really diversifying that class of leadership students. So 2019 changed, and I should go back to 2017. I thought I had 2 slides, so I apologize. One of the things that they noticed is that even when there were more diverse applicants, it wasn't changing the numbers. They were still seeing the same number of candidates accepted. So they realized what they were doing to be fair, and I wish you could see me because I'm air quoting here, fair. Being anonymous seems like it's fair. I don't know who it is. Oops, let me back up there. I don't know who is submitting this, so I'm trying to be as fair as possible, but let's be equitable. And I think that that's really what we were thinking about in terms of taking off, identifying the people that are applying, so you see beyond the piece of paper and you see the whole person. And also having supervisors actively encourage people to apply for the program and making it possible for them to be part of the class, because it is a big time commitment. So this is our class of 2019, and you can see it is a more diverse class on all levels, and it was really, we learned a lot as an organization just from that little piece, that little tweak of being more intentional. So I will sum all this up to say that I think it's more than just putting the job notice out there, that there's some recruiting. We have internships here, which are really phenomenal, that allow us to get to know, again, the person and see beyond the paper. And our human resources team is really active. And even if you were at a small library, and I kind of came from a small library, part of a larger system before I came to Richland Library, you can look for people in your community. You can tell people about job openings. I've done that. So we want to, get the best possible team, and you can be your own mini recruiter. Before I jump into policies, I just want to check in and see if there's any questions thus far. Okay, I see none, so I'm going to proceed. So policies are hard, and sometimes that's where there's a lot of tension, because policies are to protect our staff, they're to protect our customers, and they're to protect our facilities, which is essentially, public property. So they exist for a reason, but they don't always work for every customer. And I will say that I'm really happy here at Richland Library that we do have the latitude to consider the person in front of us and decide, how best to apply that policy. A perfect example, I've already mentioned, we have a family that comes in regularly, and actually both of their children are on the spectrum, but one of the children stems, and he can be quite loud. And so one day I was in the stacks recently, and I heard a lot of loud talking. And normally, I give it a few minutes, and then I go over and, just remind kiddos to use their inside voice, that we have neighbors upstairs who are trying to study or whatever. And I walked over and I saw that it was this particular child, and I know, having the context and knowing where he's coming from, I knew that the best thing to do was to let him do his thing. And so I think the only time I've interjected when it's come to this particular family was we actually have this shadow box piece, and one day I saw him standing on top of it, and so I said, hey, Dad, I'm not trying to alarm you, but you know, your kiddo is standing on top of the shadow box, so could I get your help? So, and we even actually go up and get the dad's hold from him for him because it's on another level, because we want him to be able to stay. We know it's very alarming for his children if he is out of their sight. So we go and get holds for him. So I think just really thinking about policies and how they impact people. We have courtesy cards in the children's room because we want to be able to, if we have children that maybe are over the county line, we check out to them on our courtesy cards from time to time, just a few items. But also if we encounter homeless families that wanted to have some books, that we try to make that happen for them. So I think there's your policies and there's how they are applied, and I think diversity plays a part in that application. Thank you, Dylan. Yes, I mean, thank you for asking for the clarification. Yes, I do mean when I talk about being on the spectrum, I'm talking about autism. Absolutely. I really love this quote. This actually came up in our safety and security. It's actually called Keeping Each Other Safe, is the training that all staff goes through. And we try to do it every few years because it's good to just get a reminder of things. And this actually came from our lead social worker, but thinking about in all settings engaging clients with compassion and respect, it goes a long way. But I also like that it talks about being culturally relevant and considering everything. And this quote doesn't say it particularly, but also one thing that we try to take into consideration is ACEs, which if you haven't heard of ACEs is adverse childhood experiences, and there's a lot of information out there if you want to do a deep dive, but it impacts who we are, how we react to things. It's basically trauma-informed care is another name for it. So just we can't know everything as public librarians. Sometimes we walk in with people walk in and we have no context for what's going on with them, but just trying to be as welcoming and as accessible as we can be. And also when we have more information, maybe we can be even more so. So that's a perfect segue. We're very, very fortunate to have social workers here at Richland Library. This is a growing trend. When we started our program, there were a handful of libraries, and they tended to be bigger cities that had social workers as part of their staff. So on the left, you see this was a sign, a whiteboard that we used to advertise events on, but also we started, one of the ways that the social work program here started is through USC. We started with the Masters in Social Work program. We became a field visit site. So I started out as myself and a colleague, we supervised two Masters in Social Work interns. And we were really kind of flying by the seat of our pants because we knew that we had people that needed help, and we tried to figure out the best way. People don't want you to walk up and say, hey, you look like you might be homeless or you might need, so we're trying to figure out how to get the word out and convey that those services are offered here at the library. And this program is well established now. That is Lee Patterson on the right, and she's the manager of our social work program. And but still people are surprised that we have social workers and all the things that we can do and offer. And that includes the whole family. That's something that we really think about. Lee and her team do a variety of things. They have office hours so people can meet and they can connect people with resources. They have several programs that help with housing, that can help with job applications, and they've got money to pull from. So one of the grants is New Hope is really phenomenal, and it helps even with paying some utilities and things like that. So it really is life-changing, and it's great for us when we encounter families in need that we're able to connect them to Lee and her team so they can get the help that they need. So it is a great equalizer, and we even do things like blood pressure clinics and flu shots, and everybody knows, I mean, because you're hearing it every other day, how expensive healthcare is. So being able to offer that is huge. We don't do a lot of flu shots for children. I think it's 12 and up, but at least if the parents can get their flu shots, then maybe they can, get free flu shots for their kiddos elsewhere. So this is something else that we offer at Richland Library. And this is primarily at our main library, but we also have collections that are scattered throughout our system. And this is the Education Studio, and we focus on multisensory instruction. And so with the Education Studio, that is a space that is really meant to support struggling readers. And in particular, it is geared towards children with learning differences. So that's why we use the multisensory approach. When you look at dyslexia, the research bears out that what really makes a difference, what really offers a ramp to literacy for those children is multisensory instruction. And I could talk for a long time about this, but I'm going to touch on it briefly unless somebody really wants me to go in depth, but I'll talk a little bit more. We do have two reading specialists that are on our children's room staff, and children and adults, caregivers, tutors can make appointments with Laura and Emily, and they can meet for up to an hour. And so Laura and Emily can either give them some resources, whether it's a book for a parent to help with reading success at home. They can show them some of the manipulatives and supports that we have to offer here at the main library that they can use while they're here with us, or they may refer them out to get evaluated for dyslexia or another learning difference. So it's really incredible. They also, I should say, Laura and Emily are offering, this will be I think this is our second year of doing a third grade reading camp. For those of you that aren't in South Carolina, our legislature has put into the code of law that all third graders not reading on level at third grade are to be held back. And so we kind of had a few years where they weren't enforcing it, and now we're at the point of enforcing it, and it's causing a lot of stress for parents and students alike. So this year we were able to get some funding, and we're doing it 3 times. So we're offering a free 2-week, it's 4 days each week, 9:30 to 12:30, multisensory instruction reading camp for rising third graders or rising fourth graders. So we're really trying to target those kids who are most in need at that critical juncture. So we're trying to help them, give them the tools that they need, or to give them a little bump up, hopefully, that will keep them from being held back. That's what we're trying to do. But I will tell you, there is nothing like it in this community. There's nothing like it that's free. And it is small because they really need to do hands-on instruction with these children, but it is incredible, and we're thrilled that they're able to offer more slots. So I think this is another way that we're embracing diversity and thinking about divergent learners and how children with learning differences, how we can help them in a way, in a capacity that we can support. And we actually have more things coming, but I can't reveal them yet. So accessibility, and I'm hoping, I can't quite see the corner of the slide. Oh, wait, it's right there in front of me, I think. Oh, yes, it is. So if you look at the gentleman in the red hat, you will see that right beside him, that's Paul from Flow Circus, and he is a regular performer of ours. And so we offer interpreters. And in this particular case, this particular summer, we automatically had interpreters at this particular event so that way families would know. And we have been partnering with SC Hands and Voices and trying to increase our accessibility for those families that might be deaf or hard of hearing. So one of the things that we're trying to do is make sure that children and families know that if they need an interpreter, we do need a little bit of lead time just because we book with an outside agency. We can bring an interpreter in for an event that they're interested in attending. The other accessibility, one of the other accessibility things that we're working on is, again, with families with children with autism. We are exploring, we think this summer we're going to open the main library early. So on Sundays, so we usually open 2 to 6, and so we're going to open like 12:30 to 1:30. No lights, no escalators, very low sensory experience just for these families so they have the freedom to explore the children's room and the teen center without fear of judgment or reprisal or embarrassment. That's what we often hear for families with children with autism, because sometimes they act in unexpected ways. And so we are trying to make them feel as welcome as we can. And so we are thinking that this is going to be a really something that's really embraced by this community. And of course, we're reaching out to partners in the community to communicate this early opening. And along those lines, when we reopened our Richland Library Southeast location, it included a multi-sensory room. So you'll see there's the light tube with the water. There's all kinds of manipulatives and things to help with sensory overload. When I went in and visited this room, it was very low light. It was very calming. So this is a room, the way that they're approaching it now, families can book it, I think, for 30 minutes or an hour. I think it depends on whether it's the weekend or during the week. Therapists can come in and work with clients in this room. And on the left, you'll see some of the kinds of things that they have. The little cushion stools got kind of little nubs, so it provides a lot of sensory input. The pea pod that the little one is sitting in reading the book, again, it provides that real intense closeness and sensory feeling of being kind of, wrapped up. And then there's the body squeezer, which if you've seen anything about Temple Grandin, you know that's something that essentially she designed, and I think it was actually something that she saw used with cattle. So these things can be brought out. Some of these things are out in the room, and some of these things can be brought out on demand. That is a special room in that space, but we're really proud to have it, and the community's been really excited about it, and we're starting to offer some programming to go along with that space. So when you think about your exhibits, thinking about your community is important. And I will say we need mirrors, but we also need windows. So I've heard from and seen posts from authors where people say, and don't get me wrong, I've said inconsiderate things or things without as much thought as I should put behind them. It's our community doesn't need a Latino author because we're mostly white, or they don't need an Asian author, or they don't, whatever the teacher, the professional said. And so we do need those windows. And this was a great exhibit that we were able to get here at Richland Library. And it's the Our Voice exhibit. And I wanted to take a minute because it is such an incredible exhibit. But I also want to give a shout out to the Nickel. So those of you that are interested in children's services, I cannot say enough about what a phenomenal organization they are. It's the National Center for Children's Illustrated Literature. In terms of what you get, this is a very inexpensive exhibit. They come beautifully matted and framed. It is, I think actually they drove it to us. And they're really lovely and wonderful to work with. And they have a lot of diverse exhibits celebrating children's book illustrators. So I just want to say that. But thinking about those exhibits too, and that can be a variety of things. You can talk about the history of LGBTQIA. You can bring in artists with different abilities. There's lots of exhibits to think about, but I think that that's something, again, diversity plays a part in that decision making. Just like with authors and performers. So here are some of the people that we've been lucky enough to have authors and performers and illustrators. And so Gracelyn and Pat Mora and Cece Bell and Sonia de los Santos and R. Gregory Christie and Secret Agent 23 Skidoo. Amazing. Again, sometimes it was that mirror for our community. Sometimes it's that window. These things are important. We need to see different, what a children's, the vast array of what children's book creators look like and sound like, and also hear different music. So yes, Cece Bell wrote El Defo, and she was wonderful and lovely, and just really agreed, Hannah. It's one of my absolute favorites, and one of the favorites of the kids that I pass out to. They're always so excited to read that book. And she was really impactful, and she spoke, and you could see her. She wears a hearing device, and you could see it, and she talks a bit about her experience, and she talks about what it was like to lose her hearing. So again, we need to see that, and as a public library, we have the ability to give that platform. And when you have a storytelling festival and you have this person, you celebrate this person, you say this person, their community, their culture, the words, they're important. We need to pay attention to this. This is for us. So something else that we do is we started out doing America's Battle of the Books. I don't know if any of you ever participated in that program. And it was great. It was suggested by another colleague. We really enjoyed it. We have, just like a lot of libraries all over the country, have a lot of kids that are book nerds. They love to read. They want to ask questions. They're competitive. One of the things that we learned pretty quickly, the way that we had kids answering questions was writing them down. That was our very first inaugural year. And we determined quickly that was not a great fit for all of our kids. For those kids that were dyslexic, it was very stressful for them. So again, you learn, you make a mistake, you don't get it right, and then you adjust. So we started thinking about what can we do to make this less stressful for those kids with learning differences. The other thing we wanted to do too is, as we spent a little more time in this program, we noticed that the books were not as, just bluntly, not as diverse as we would like. They're diverse in terms of like the kinds of books. We weren't seeing very many graphic novels, which can be such a great gateway for kids to get kids into books. But we also weren't seeing a lot of different stories being told. So we, some very brave teen colleagues of mine, decided that when we took a break from the children's version of the program, that they would create their own. And so now what we have is the book battle. We didn't take a very far leap there with the name. We called it what it is. And we've been able to incorporate a lot more diverse experiences and people, and it's been a great experience. And we also, to circle back to the whole writing thing, we include some rounds that are different. You know, not all kids are great with trivia too, even the ones that are really excited about it. So we have some rounds. We did All Alone in the Universe. I think that's the one that I'm thinking of. It just won the Newbery a few years ago, and we had them perform a rescue of a plastic cup from the bottom of the well to kind of recreate what was happening in the book. And so it, you know, we have tried to diversify this program as much as possible to make it as accessible for all of our children and teens to participate, because we have one for children and one for teens. So displays, we talk about displays a lot, and so I think the thing to be wary of with displays, or just to keep in mind, maybe wary is not the best word choice there, is that people don't just get a month. And I think that I've been seeing a lot of chatter about like saying, hey, guess what? Black History Month books, they can be checked out all throughout the year. I think keeping up perpetual displays, especially if you know that these books are really needed in your community. Again, we got the mirrors and windows. We want to have that happening, and I'll tell you a story to just kind of say why this is important. One of my colleagues said, I had a customer come in, and they said, we heard you have an Asian section now in your library. And she was trying to figure out what this customer meant, and what she meant is we had recently started again we call them book bundles, but they're displays. We started a display of the Asian and Asian American experience. And so in their community, in their shared conversations, they were talking about, they noticed that it was important to them, that it meant that the library was for them. And so I think always these little things add up in a big way. So not just making your display for that month. And the other thing is, and I'm going to talk about this in the next slide, but making sure that there is a good representation of own voices. So books about that experience written by actual authors who live that experience, who have that lived experience, is really, really important and critical. Along with displays, one of the things that we do, and I can't recommend it enough because it really does grow your relationship with your community, and it's such a great service you can offer children and families, is we pull books. We recommend books. So when people walk in, we say, hi, how are you? Let us know if we can help pick out some good books for you. And then we check back in with them. And so I checked back in with a family today, and you know, you are pulling books, and you know, you want to make sure, and I'll say it the way Augusta Baker would say it, you want to make sure that, yes, if you have an African American child in front of you, you probably do want to pick some books with African American characters. But also, if you have a white child in front of you, you want to pick out books with African American characters too. You don't just pick out boy books for boys and girl books for girls. You know, you want to make sure that there is diversity in what you're selecting for that recommendation. If you can. Sometimes it's, I like Harry Potter, what else do you have? But if it's just a general pick me out some good books, then you have a lot of latitude with what you can pick out and what you can recommend. And I think people are always surprised and delighted when you bring them something that they wouldn't have maybe picked out themselves. And I've seen people take a lot of books home that way and discover great new stories and great new characters that they wouldn't have known about if you didn't introduce them to them. So this is a colleague it's a friend of mine and a colleague of Dr. Cook's, who I saw on Facebook. And so I just wanted to point this out because I thought this was I think this is a great point. I think, you know, I will say as a woman, if I walked up and I saw a display of women's history books and books about women and it was all written by men, then I would have a certain feeling about that. And so someone shared this thought, and I think it's something when you're pulling those displays, especially when, again, you're operating from privilege, to really think carefully about what voices you're amplifying on that display, because that's what you're doing, is amplifying those voices. This is such a great service, and I do want to talk about this in terms of children, because children are very much at the mercy of their parents or grown-ups or whoever brings them to the library. So what Fresh Picks are, they're a special collection of books that we have perpetually on display whenever they're checked in, and they're usually like the hottest title. So you're probably going to see some things that are really popular on there, Ghost and The Adventures of Captain Underpants. You'll see some things that are on our South Carolina Book Award nominees list, because that's a really popular list that's read from a lot in the summer. Books that the staff likes to give out. The One and Only Ivan, Dork Diaries. And the reason I'm saying all this is because these books do not pull holds. So that means for the kid that has a parent that will never put something on hold for them, like Dog Man, they have the luck and the fortune of happening upon a Dog Man because it's checked in with Fresh Picks. And that, to me, is such an equalizer, because everybody's situation is different, and to be able to like hand that book to a kid that really, really wants it is just huge. This is something that started out for adults, and I love it for adults. It's very much like a bookstore up there, but I really do love it for kids, because there's been so many times that kids have asked for a book, and I'll say, I'm so sorry, it's not checked in, I can put it on hold for you, only to be told, no, I can't put it on hold, we don't know when we're coming back, or my mom doesn't want me to put anything on hold because she'll forget about it and she doesn't want me to bother, or whatever it is. And so I really do feel like this is such a great accessibility point. And again, thinking about diversity when you make the selections for whatever a fresh pick table would look like is something that we do a lot of thinking about. So this is our diverse books for families bags. I think we've got a lot more. I think we started with about 20 to 25. And we had a small team, and this came out of the Social Awareness Task Force. This is something that we wanted to do. And when you open these bags, there's about 15 books, and they range, there's usually like at least one board book in there, and 3 to 4 middle grade novels or graphic. There might be a graphic novel thrown in there, and then the rest are picture books. So about 10 picture books are in there. And we try to cover the broad spectrum of diversity. So we talk about race and ethnicity and religion and immigration and socioeconomics and LGBTQIA and I think I have, and abilities. So, when we sat in that room, we were going back and forth and thinking about and calling out titles and talking about it, and all the things that I've talked about so far about thinking about own voices and thinking about the story and how the story is told. We tried to put into these bags for families. They check out for 52 days, so it's longer than a regular book checkout. There is a sheet in there that's directed to the parents that has a quote from the great Rudine Sims Bishop essay on mirrors and windows when we talk about diverse books. And also you see these colorful rounders of questions, so that can hopefully be applied to almost any book. So you can use them, you can, like, how are you like the characters in the book? One of the questions is, who is telling the story? Because, again, that's important to think about and what the reflection of the story is. I'm going to just check in and see how everybody's doing. I know Jason Reynolds is coming up, and I can't compete. So is everybody kind of hanging in there? I've got a few more slides. All right. I'll keep going. So Kids in Print is our literary magazine, and I'll just touch on it briefly. It's been going on for almost 25 years now. It's something that we are always looking and trying to increase. Me too. I'm not going till tomorrow, but I'll take pictures for you. Um, it's our literary magazine. Again, it's been going on for 25 years. Thinking about the diversity of what the voices that get amplified in this publication, the diversity of who's selecting the work in this publication. These are all things that kind of play into this program. This lovely picture photograph at the top was the cover for our last magazine. That's Victoria down below, and I just want to share some of the voices that we've been able to give a stage to, a wider stage with this publication. And I'm going to pause for just a second so you can read this. We've had teens that we've published anonymously that have talked about the foster care system. We've had children who are dyslexic, who are having a hard time in school. The parents come up and say, you have no idea what a bright spot this was for them to get recognized for something, since academics are so hard for them. We really tried to try to think about the voices that aren't being heard and how can we make them heard, and use this opportunity with Kids in Print. Story times, I'll touch again on this briefly. We don't do themes here at Richland Library. That is actually something that came from Augusta Baker. We pick out a variety of good books, and for most of us, if not all of us, diversity always plays a part in thinking about what you're going to read. I try to always have some kind of diverse book in my storytime lineup, and people really appreciate it. I mean, it's just, again, mirrors and windows, and sometimes you have these unexpected situations. And I will say, I was reading Crown for a school group, and I heard a quiet voice in the back. I read the part about the do-rag, and I heard a quiet little voice, and it was predominantly white audience, but I heard a quiet little voice in the back say, I wear a do-rag too. And so you just don't know what you're doing when you introduce these books, but it really changes hearts and minds. So we do, if you're thinking about, so I don't read Starring Carmen, and Alana reads it the next Saturday. We have a Storytime shelf, so we pull from that, but we also pull from the main collection as long as the books are in good shape. Saturday is more of a rotation, or Saturday story times, but I've been leading toddler for the last almost 8 weeks now, so I'm keeping track of kind of what I'm reading. Are you thinking about, Alana, are you thinking about in terms of pulling from the collection, or are you just thinking about making sure that different diversity is represented in the various story times? We don't, and I do think that probably that's something that we could do a better job of, and making sure that we are giving voice to the great variety. Yes, Yes, it is. It is hard to do. Um, I think you can take it on board with yourself, but that's something that we can definitely think about. Again, I'm always up for suggestions and ideas because there's always room to grow. So we have participated in Drag Queen King Story Hour, and there's our drag king. It was really exciting because Marty McGuy and Marty was saying that he is always looking for acceptance in the drag community because the kings get downplayed. But this is our Drag Queen King Story Hour at Pride this year, and we are looking forward to partnering with some more story times at our Harriet Hancock Center. So we have so McCabe, that's a great question. We have not. We've had some adults challenge diverse books after books that they picked up, and Tango Makes Three comes to mind. I will say, and my colleague Jocelyn and I we liked, when she was in the children's room with me, we liked to read together a lot. And we actually had a story time that we didn't intend to be an entirely African American story time. It just was. And we didn't say anything about it. And it was just like, these are the books we read today. And nobody was like, why didn't you read any books about, we have not gotten pushback in that way, except for the occasional person that picks up a book that maybe was in the story time. We pull out books on a red cart after story time and put them on the floor and I call it the book buffet, and let people pick out, and that's when we've had some pushback. But we're pretty good at handling the pushback and, talking about, it's fine if that book is not for you, but, we do represent our community. Just really quickly, yes, thank you for asking. Now, interestingly for that, we were all prepared for some big pushback on Drag King Queen story time. What we really got pushback on from our community is we had these rainbow clings at all of our branches, and it said "Brave the Rainbow," and so that's where we got some real feedback from our community. Nobody actually protested. There was some, talk of that, but it did not happen. I think there was one person that asked some questions, like kind of stated that they didn't like it, and they were like, we had a lot of staff on hand, and they answered it, and they said, okay, well, nobody's forcing anybody to come to the story time. It's free and open to the public. As a matter of fact, it's as free as you can be. We were out on a street, so it was pretty free and open. Let me know if you have more questions about that. I mean, that's always the hardest thing, because we do stand for intellectual freedom and supporting the right to read for everyone. But it can be hard to have somebody face to face who is very angry with you, wants to blow your house down because you brought out a book about penguins. Like I said, oh yes. And so, like I said, looking for these small opportunities. This is a set that I found. Let me just say off the cuff that, or right from the top here, I do not like the police officer and felon, so I always take the felon out because it just really irritates me. But I like the other parts, the other diversity, the diversity in age and ethnicity and ability that this set offers. And our kids like to play, and I do remember on our opening day that there was a little boy playing with, I'm not sure which character it is, but somebody overheard, he was actually at our dollhouse playing with the character, and he said, he's got dark curly hair and blue glasses like me. And so again, it's like our young man that said, I wear a do-rag too. it means a lot. It means that you're important when you're mirrored in a big public way or even a small public way. And this is something that I was so thrilled when we did it. We've started adding our pronouns. You have the option to add your pronouns to your email, and I did. And I was actually answering, we have an Ask a Librarian feature here at Richland Library, and I was answering that. And ironically, I was answering a question about mermaids. Cats that are mermaids, yes, if you have not heard about them. And I got this really lovely response, unexpected, from a customer. So as we continue our journey, things that I would say to you is just if it's something that you feel like maybe we're not the experts in, or we don't have there's somebody out there that's going to want to do it with us. The African American Studies program at the University of South Carolina, maybe you're familiar with that fine institution. They have been tremendous partners for us, and they helped us bring Derek Barnes in, and they're helping us with Kelly Starling Lyons, and they've been great partners with us. So if you are in a more homogenous community, look for people who might partner with you to amplify those voices. Again, I've mentioned Harriet Hancock. This is a great organization in our community, obviously LGBTQIA, and they've been more than willing and more than gracious to come and talk to our staff, to raise our awareness, to educate us, to talk to us about how we can be great allies for children and teens and their parents. You've already seen Tamara's presentation, but our Let's Talk Race, it may be something that's not happening in your community. If you're here in Columbia, I do invite you to attend one of these because they're just incredible. And I am happy to report that they have become more diverse, and we are seeing a greater presence of those with privilege. So it's really, I always come away from this and I learned something about myself and how I can be a better ally. So they're really incredible, and they're free. And if you don't live close to Columbia, there may be something online that you can participate in that offers that same kind of opportunity. This is the Empathy Lab. And again, a couple of the ones that we had gave customers, and it's not really for children under 12 because of the VR and their developing brains, but it gave people a taste of what it was like to be homeless or to be differently abled. So it was tremendous. And again, when we talk about services to children and families, we're talking about the whole family. So letting people know that we're trying to give voice to their experience, or they have the opportunity to see what another experience is like, is just huge. Race Matters is actually conversations that we're having with staff, and that's something else that we're continuing to do. And of course, we're librarians, so reading can help move the needle on what you know about diversity and how you act on it in your library. You've been so kind. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. This is my beautiful dog, Rufus. And but otherwise, I'm probably going to wrap up because you've been kind and I'm over time.
No, no worries at all. This has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. While people are thinking of questions that they might want to ask, I just want to piggyback on what Heather has been mentioning in terms of mirrors and windows, and that's an essay written by Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop, and it was certainly a fundamental and very foundational article for me in the work that I do with diversity. So I will, after the session, push this out to you all and ask Kaylee to pin the article on the website so you can take a look at that as well. Okay, so Heather, Jordan wants to know who, oh, okay, Yeah, I just answered Jordan's question. So we will push that out to you. Other questions for Heather? Lots of amazing things happening at Richland.
If anybody ever wants to come and see any of this in action, you are more than welcome. Or for distance students, if any of you, are you still called distance students? Online students?
Yeah.
If you want to like reach out to me, I'm getting ready to share my contact information. If you want to find out more about something, if you want to give me a call, if you want to talk over email, I'm more than happy to share what I know or what we're doing or answer any questions.
And just to also address a little bit more of what Alana was saying, if you look up Jessica Ann Bratt, and her last name is Bratt, she's been doing some writing and presenting about African American story times. And she's in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and she talks about how she tracks different things and some of the pushback that she's received. So her work might be interesting to look up in for that particular topic as well. Other thoughts or questions? Yeah, that's a
That's
great
not
question,
coarse at
isn't it?
all. It is. It's not. It's not coarse at all. We are exceptionally fortunate here at Richland Library to be well funded and well supported by our community. As I mentioned, I came from another library system, and I remember poo-pooing. Somebody showed me something um, from Richland Library before I came to work here, and I was like, "Oh, that Richland Library, they have all that money." And we are very lucky, but we try to be very good stewards of what we get, and we do go after grants and other funding from our community so that we can support these things. And we also have an executive director who is just to, and maybe this is a coarse way of putting it, Benjamin, is willing to put her money where her mouth is. She really is willing to, she is very invested in race and equity. She's always been invested in diversity and, how we can make that happen, how we can make the library more accessible, and how we can make it more welcoming to everyone in our community. And that's something we're working on every day. So I don't know if that was a great question, but we do have great funding, and I wish, that's okay. So some of the initiatives that I mentioned, like with our education studio, there's some grant funding behind that. I know we're seeking some private funding for that as well because we're looking to grow that. Um, uh, Several things, I know a lot of, not a lot, but several of our programs with our social workers are grant funded. And I'm trying to think what else. And some of the things are partnerships, and sometimes I feel like that gets overlooked. But I do recommend, especially if you're at a small library with less resources at your fingertips, that if there's something that's important, like for example, bringing the Our Voice Coretta Scott King illustrator exhibit to your community, look for a partner who's willing to to help with some of the cost. The African American Studies Department partnered with us on that and helped fund that initiative because we wanted to make sure that that happened. And we also reached out to our Columbia Museum of Art, so we had a lot of partnership on that. So not everything is something that we just pull out our checkbook and write a check and say yes. We look for partners as well, and I think that is something really to be considered.
Other questions or comments? All right. If there are no further questions or comments, please join me in thanking Heather for her time and expertise today. It has been an absolute pleasure having you in class today. So much great information and so many great things happening at Richland. It's really good to see.
Thank you so much. And like I said, I'm here. My door is always open, and I'm happy to talk to your students anytime or anybody at the university.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for a great session today. We will meet again next week for the next installment of our Baker Diversity Lecture Series. In the meantime, be well, and we will meet again next week. Have a good evening.